In the video on communication skills, I mentioned that one set of skills was what we're doing within ourselves. And this grew into another ebook called The Positive and Negative Voice. Without a doubt, when families and I started to work and develop these skills, we did it in the US in the early 70s when Lamaze was still being taught. Grantley Dick Reed, Childbirth Without Fear, and the Bradley Method, 3 obstetricians who developed 3 different skills-based methods. The Childbirth Without Fear had been taught in New Zealand, where I've resided for over 30 years. And that was the first childbirth classes taught. The idea was that women shouldn't be afraid of birth. And the fact was, this has been a huge obstacle for women birthing. We hear it presently with "don't listen to negative birth stories." That's incredibly deceptive because we learn often not from mistakes, not from failures, but from the gaps. What could we have done, or what might we do? And that's why Birthing Better is such a strong skills-based method, because it covers so many of those questions. We learned very early on that women cannot just pluck fear out of their brain around childbirth. Never going to happen. And we can't make each other feel guilty about having fear of birth. It's hardwired into us. Every traditional community that I've been in is very anxious around childbirth. And how do we know that? Because they put so many restrictions on pregnancy and birth and the newborn period. People do that as a way to safeguard under a certain set of circumstances. So the do's and don'ts when you're pregnant in traditional communities are telling you that people are anxious. Don't sit in a door, you might obstruct the birth. Why are they anxious about obstructed labors? Because they happen. And if a baby can't get out of a woman's body, the baby will die and eventually the mother will die. And that goes against the #1 childbirth goal, which is a live mother. Traditional cultures tolerated dead babies, but cultures don't tolerate dead mothers easily because there aren't very many. Not every woman is pregnant every year. So you have very few pregnant women in any traditional community, unless it is massively large, and most of them aren't. So what we found was that fear of birth is hardwired. Some people don't feel a lot of fear. It doesn't mean that they have good labors. Other women feel a tremendous amount of fear or trepidation, and their birth is fine. Other people feel fears and trepidations. Sometimes they're accurate. There is a problem. Sometimes that problem is picked up, and sometimes it's not. So when we developed the ebook on the positive and negative voice, it had to do with the fact that we could have lots of negative thoughts and that we shouldn't pay them any attention, meaning we shouldn't try to get rid of them. We should just accept them. They're what's rabbiting on in our brain. But when we were highly skilled, we could use skills. Our managing part of our brain would check in and use skills, and we'd make choices, and we could use multiple skills at the same time. Now, this goes against Michelle O'Donnell, which says that women should get out of their cortical brain and into their primal brain and let birth happen. I can remember there was a period of time in which I heard midwives say, no matter how women want to vocalize, that's fine. And they would permit women to just scream and scream and scream during labor. And often those babies came out wired to the hilt because they're inside a body that is so loaded with tension. It didn't matter if she was afraid, but if she lacked skills, she could not manage well. If she wasn't afraid and she had an easy birth, a relatively pain-free birth, many women still couldn't manage because they lacked skills. From the 1980s on, people were told and have been told since then, cows and cats aren't taught to birth. You don't need skills. You instinctively know how to birth because women have always birthed. But it's not accurate. We don't instinctively know how. Our body does it, but doing it doesn't necessarily mean we know how to work with what's happening to us as it's unfolding. And Birthing Better families wanted a better activity, a better one-off experience. And so we developed lots of skills. And one is, what do you do with a negative voice? And what we're simply say to you is, it's okay, have it. When you have skills, use the skills. And that, in some ways, is more instinctive, because when we're highly skilled and we're breathing in and we know how to expand inside our pelvis, we are more likely to do that because we focus on what we are doing based on what is happening to us and inside us. And this was not hard. And this is why birthing better skills are so extensive. People would say to me after the birth, I could focus every moment on how to expand inside my pelvis and soften inside my pelvis on an exhale. And I could check inside myself and soften any tension around the pelvic clock. And I could make certain that I was as open as possible in my pelvis between my sit bones. And I could actually feel whether the contraction was going off if I started to lean forward. Or if I was on my knees, I could feel my butt muscles begin to tighten up. And I could correct that. This is feedback. We knew the skills were working because we knew we could refine them at any moment of the time. So what have you learned from this little video about how we developed the positive and negative voice skills? We acknowledged the negative. Didn't matter whether people were afraid of birth or not, or if they hated every moment, or they hated what people were doing to them or around them, or their circumstances, or they weren't getting the birth they wanted. What we knew is those people that were highly skilled, at least with a birthing better method, would use skills. And you know what they would say after their birth? I am so proud of myself. Not that I accomplished the birth, but I used skills at every single moment of that birth. I knew exactly what I needed to do and what I was doing. And if a father or other had skills and they were working with a woman, the family got closer together. We built the family, and that is important. We built the relationship between the birthing woman, the coaching dad or other, and we built the relationship they had with their baby. Because after the birth, being skilled in birth, whether it was a labor or cesarean, whether it was what they wanted or never imagined, they would say, let's try to figure this out when they had issues with their newborn.